February 28th regular meeting of the Board of County Commissioners. Welcome everyone to Harris Hall and welcome virtually anybody who may be joining us online. This is a regular meeting of the Board of County Commissioners. Mr. Mokaraisi, we do have a 10 a.m. time certain today, as everyone's aware of, and we'll do our best to stand by that. I think we should have no difficulty in doing that, achieving a 10 a.m. time certain. So, any adjustments to the agenda?
No.
To the board, any adjustments? Vice Chair Trieger.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to pull item B1 from the consent calendar. So that's 5B1 for discussion.
Thank you. Any further adjustments? Then for the record, Vice Chair Trieger has pulled item 5B1 from the consent calendar that will be discussed as a separate motion following the consent calendar. Excellent. Mr. Mokaraisi, do we have any emergency business today?
We do not.
Thank you. To the board, I see none. We'll move down the agenda to public comments. We'll entertain public comments today from people who are in the audience here in Harris Hall and from people who may be online. I'll first conduct the queue for people who have signed up in Harris Hall, and then we will continue the queue with anybody who may be signed up online. And Ms. Jones will cover that queue. You'll be allowed 3 minutes. If you will step to the mic when your name is called. Keep an eye on the clock on the wall that ticks down 3 minutes. There'll be a brief notice at about 30 seconds. You have 30 seconds to conclude. When the time is up, we'll ask you to conclude and finish your statement. Anything you wish to have written and entered into the record in written statement, please provide that to the back of the room or to the front table. So the first person we have signed up today is Ann Walsh, who will be followed by Paul Metzler. Ms. Walsh, can you step to the microphone, identify yourself, and proceed with your 3 minutes?
Good morning. I'm Ann Walsh, and I'm from Eugene, born and raised, and I'm sorry that I have to read off of my phone. I was hired as pre-pandemically, to be a temporary election worker and for Lane County elections. And I went through their hiring process, then went through the personnel source process, finally. And my position was elections ballot pickup person, a position in which you drive and work in pairs. You go to ballot boxes, gather the ballots, and deliver them to the elections office. In 2021, an accommodation was made for the position that all drivers would drive in separate cars because of COVID. This worked well for everyone as long as we all maintain visual contact at all times. I'm willing to give Lane County the benefit of the doubt about the mandate. They must have been doing what they thought was best based on the information narrative that was coming from all directions. But believing that medical records are private and believing that the COVID vaccines, now we know, may not prevent all people from catching and spreading COVID, it was difficult to understand how such a mandate was in place and how sharing medical records for something that doesn't protect others was appropriate. It was horrifying to me from the beginning of the national vaccination campaign that stating one's status publicly created yet another division in our society. I decided early on not to announce and take any side. The information narrative pitted the vaccinated against the unvaccinated, and it was ugly, to say the least. I declined to provide my vaccination records to Lane County, but I showed up for work and was turned away. They called me to work the next cycle and wanted me to work, but I couldn't under the same circumstances. I was encouraged to take an exception, which means that you have to disclose that you've not had the shot, but you can give your reasons why. It seems like I have 30 seconds or less now. So I want to ask that you reconsider the mandate. And if you reconsider it for employees please make sure to reconsider it for temporary election workers.
Thank you for your testimony, and I'm
Thank you.
afraid to apologize if it was abbreviated. Please provide written testimony if you wish to.
Thank you so much.
Next is Paul Metzler, who is the last person signed up in Harris Hall. Mr. Metzler, would you step to the mic? Keep an eye on the clock for 30 seconds. You'll hear an audio tone at 30 seconds, and then keep the clock.
Yes, good morning, Commissioners. My name's Paul Metzler with the Lane County Republican Party, and thank you for this opportunity to speak. I come before you to address the issue of Lane County's requirement of COVID vaccination to work as a temporary election worker. In Oregon, only Lane and Multnomah County have this requirement. Evidence is mounting that the COVID vaccines are not only ineffective, but risky as well. The Cleveland Clinic study from September of 2020 determined that the bivalent COVID-19 mRNA vaccine is of only modest effectiveness. A Pfizer executive has stated that their COVID vaccine interferes with women's reproductive health. By mandating COVID vaccination for temporary employees, Lane County exposes itself to liability risk for no good purpose. Lane County has provided a form for religious beliefs exemption request. This form states that the county is to determine an individual whether their belief can be considered religious, and this determination is situational on a case-by-case basis. What an outrageous assault on the separation of church and state. Do you really want Lane County disputing interpretations of the Quran, the Bible, the Talmud? Our county clerk, Dina Dawson, has expressed to us a desire to include in the pool of temporary election workers a wider bipartisan base. And this is an admirable thing. It's a good move to help restore the public's shattered trust in our election system. Enforcing a heavy-handed, controversial COVID vaccine requirement does not help in that effort. It just reinforces the public's perception that our election system is biased in one direction. The people of Lane County should have bodily autonomy. They should not be infringed upon in order to just get a temporary election job. Lane County should not be in the business of analyzing the sincerity of an individual's religious belief. Please help restore trust in our election system and eliminate that COVID vaccine for the temporary workers. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your testimony, Mr. Metzler. Mr. Metzler is the last person signed up in Harris Hall. After online testimony, I will look around Harris Hall to see if anyone else wishes to testify before the Board of County Commissioners this morning. Ms. Jones, I'll turn over the cue to you. Do we have anyone signed up online?
Thank you, Chair Farr. At this time, we do not have anyone signed up to give online testimony.
Thank you. Then I'll look around Harris Hall. Anyone in Harris Hall wish to provide testimony to the Board of County Commissioners? I see none. Then public comment is closed. We'll move along to item 4, which is Commissioner's response to public comments and/or other issues and remonstrances. And I'll begin with Vice Chair Trieger.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. It's been a couple of weeks. Just briefly, I have a question for our county administrator. Can you share the status of the APM, the Administrative Policies Manual item around our vaccine policy? I know there's been some discussion. It was my understanding that was ended or coming to an end soon already. Is that correct?
Yes, Chair and Commissioner Trieger, that policy ends at the end of March.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Trieger. Commissioner Buck.
Thank you, Chair. I've come today with a prepared statement that I'd like to share with everyone. As a non-Jewish white woman and an ally, I'm here today with a heavy heart to express our county's absolute condemnation of all forms of hate, bias, and white nationalism. I'm absolutely devastated and enraged by the recent anti-Semitic symbols that have been spread throughout our community. And I want to make it crystal clear that vile acts have absolutely no place in Lane County. These incidences are not isolated, nor should they be dismissed as small acts. Rather, they represent a dangerous escalation on the pyramid of hate, a model that illustrates how acts of bias and bigotry can lead to more severe and violent expressions of hate. If we do not address these incidents now, we risk allowing them to continue to escalate and potentially lead to even more severe harm in our community. We've seen our local synagogue vandalized. Our own Rabbi Yitz was in Pittsburgh en route to the Tree of Life Synagogue when the attacker killed 11 and wounded more, including Holocaust survivors. We must recognize the deep complexity of this issue and acknowledge that acts of bias and hate affect far too many members of our community. Recently, Commissioner Traeger and I were able to join a civil rights mission trip to the South in conjunction with the Eugene Springfield NAACP and the Jewish Federation. The historical people we met, in fact, living history, and the places we visited were deeply soul-changing for me. The depths of hate towards marginalized groups was and is beyond my personal comprehension. Whether you're part of the Jewish community, the Black community, the AAPI community, the immigrant community, the trans community, or any other marginalized group, please know that I stand with you and I am fully committed to creating a safe and inclusive environment for everyone. We ask all our members of our community to report any acts of bias and hate to the Oregon Department of Justice, and remind that everybody that is a victim are able to help those who are harmed by sharing this information. Our county will not tolerate hate and bias in any shape or form, and I pledge to fight at every level, whether it's in our rural or urban areas, with individuals or agencies. I ask that you join us in standing up against hate and bias, and by speaking out against those cowardly acts, and by promoting messages of love and acceptance in our community. We must work together to build a more just and equitable society that celebrates the differences and values of every member of our community. I will not rest until we achieve this goal, and I call on everyone to stand with us in this fight. In addition to that statement, I'll be asking at the end of our meeting for 2 requests. One is a statement from the Lane County Board of Commissioners on anti-Semitism, hate and bias. We have seen our other agencies, Team Springfield and the City of Eugene, do so, and to be silent in this area is not acceptable. So I'll request that later under assignments. In addition to that, I will be asking for a work session for us to come together and determine when we can have our staff issue such statements so that they are timely and responsive to the community, instead of waiting for a following board meeting in order to issue such statements. I'm not clear on what our policy is, or if we have a policy surrounding that, but we should. And so I'll ask that of my fellow board members later in the meeting.
Thank you for that statement, Commissioner Book, and I will call on you when the time is appropriate, and mention that I believe it was in 2014 or so, a similar statement was made in response to local action. We can talk more about this. And then action was taken by the board, and then the then chair, Faye Stewart, made the oral statement in between board meetings. So there is precedent for what you're asking. So we'll continue with remonstrances. I know other comments. Commissioner Seneca.
Yeah, just to hearken with Commissioner Buck, I was very disappointed to hear this happen in Santa Clara. Part of my district that, a great little community. But they rallied around, so I met with, or I've been in contact with Santa Clara community, River Road community, and also got the sheriff's office involved. The sheriff would just like to say, when you see or when you hear this stuff, they need to hear about it also. when it's happening. We, while we were talking, we purposely said, don't post any pictures of what you're receiving, because we don't need to give this any more energy than it already has. And so we are on the lookout, and we're addressing it at our local level.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Lovell.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that. Commissioner Buck, I so appreciate your words, passion and accuracy and statement. I can't agree with you more and support you more in this. I just want to say that the community of Springfield was directly affected by this. Our chief, Andy Shear, got right on board, as with our mayor, Mayor Shawn Van Gordon. They are launching investigations on this. And, it seems that most of the diverse and hateful crimes that we point out are done by such a small minority of people. I want to remind us that there's good people out there. There's good people working against this. There's people who do not stand for this. There's people that work silently behind the scenes, investigating and rooting this out and distributing leaflets of other opinions that we won't stand for hate. And so I just want to give a shout out to those people as well. I did have a statement that in light of the heaviness of this event that we all share, I do want to remind us, like I said, there's good people out there. And I want to just tell you just a brief situation that Commissioner Senig and I came up with on Friday. We were touring over and meeting a bunch of folks over in Florence, and we stopped by a local business to have a bite to eat. And there was a small young man, 4 years old. His name was Jimmy. He was behind the little service bar, and I gave Jimmy kind of a hard time because that's kind of what I do with little kids. I make both of us get in trouble at the same time. And I said, hey, Jimmy, usually when I'm sitting at a place like this, they offer me color books and crayons so I can make sure that I'm occupied before I get my meal. And Jimmy disappeared for a minute and came back with his own personal crayon book and his crayons. And so Jimmy and I sat there for about 40 minutes while we ate and color crayoned. And I thought it was kind of a fun thing, but it was interesting that somebody who was eating there noticed that and text the sheriff, who then forwarded the text to myself and Commissioner Seneca, saying, it's really good to see commissioners getting out with people and meeting them. And so I'm not kind of just blowing the horn of commissioners, but I'm also saying there's a lot of good people out there doing small acts of kindness that are making the community better. And so I want to call those people to the attention of you, that they're out there. And I just thank you for those people as well.
Thank you, Commissioner Lovell. Then Commissioner Buck, I'll state you have a written testimony there. That'll be placed in the record verbatim. I'm certain of that, besides the oral record that is our regular minutes. Thank you very much. Very briefly, each commissioner serves on various committees. Some of the committees are statutory and some of them are internal. The statutory committees are required by some form of ordinance or statute, and those include the Metropolitan Policy Commission, for instance. It includes a Metropolitan Wastewater Management Commission. It includes our Mental Health Advisory Commission, which is also our local Alcohol and Drug Planning Committee. They meet monthly. There's a very strong group of individuals, about half of which are professionals in either mental behavioral health or in drug and alcohol planning. And they make recommendations to the Board of County Commissioners, not as robustly as they have in recent months, but the chair of that committee is Dr. Grace Bullock. And after each committee meeting from this point forward, she and I will come up with a small bulleted list of items that were covered at the Mental Health Advisory Local Alcohol and Drug Planning Commission meeting, which occurred last week, the week before last. While I was not able to attend, I was in Washington, D.C. at the time. So Alex Kyler attended in my place, because most of the items that I was going to be covering were Board of County Commissioners actions in coordination with the state legislature at this point in time. My points that I want to make is that Alex Kyler did spend 45 minutes with local alcohol, with the Mental Health Advisory Committee a week ago, last Wednesday, and answered a lot of questions. He planned on being there 15 minutes, Mr. Mokrajewski, but he answered every single question and really exhausted the room with his thoroughness. They also passed their work plan for the coming year, which we'll get a copy of that. That'll be forwarded to us in the next week. That is their approved work plan. We ultimately approve that work plan, but it comes as a unanimous recommendation from that particular board. And they also make recommendations for membership in their committee, which we'll be discussing after the consent calendar today. So in a statutory role, the Mental Health Advisory Local Alcohol and Drug Planning Commission has a responsibility to the Department of Human Services and Oregon Health Authority surrounding behavioral health, have a responsibility regarding developmental disability services, and also has a responsibility, of course, on drug and alcohol policy. Those are responsibilities, statutory responsibilities of that committee. So, Mr. Mokrasi, I just wanted to give a summary of that and a heads up that I'll spend about a minute from this point forward, following the Mental Health Advisory Committee meeting, just giving you a rundown on what happened at that meeting. Any further remonstrances from the board? I am seeing none. Ms. Mokrasi? And we'll move down the agenda, and we do have before us a consent calendar, which you'll find as item 5 on our agenda. If you're online, please note that item 5B1 has been pulled from the consent calendar for a separate discussion. Do I have a motion? Vice Chair Trieger.
Chair, I'll move approval of the consent calendar for Tuesday, February 28, 2023.
I'll second.
Moved by Vice Chair Trieger and seconded by Commissioner Buck. Discussion to the motion. I see none, then I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye. 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 Passes unanimously. And at this point, we'll take a moment to consider, not a moment, as long as it takes, to consider item, Mr. Mokrasi, 5B1, which is Order 230228-03, in the matter of appointing one member up to the Mental Health Advisory Local Alcohol and Drug Planning Committee. In the panel today, we have Director Eve Gray. Thank you for being with us today, Director Gray. And Vice Chair Trieger, you had asked for this item to be pulled, and I'll turn the mic over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Director Gray. Really, my concern around this echoes comments I've made in previous meetings, and I know we have an open assignment, and we'll be discussing more broadly our committee appointments and that whole process. But in this one in particular, and especially it's timely that you just shared the importance of the work of the Mental Health Advisory Committee. This is an issue that is consistently at the very top of constituent concerns in our community and looking to us to address. And so this committee really is doing work that is reflective and responsive of what the community is concerned about. And my reason for pulling this is simply that I don't feel we did a robust enough recruitment effort for a committee, for any of our committees. I would have this same flag, but particularly on this topic. It says in the packet that the notices of vacancy were advertised from November 21st, 2022 through December 22nd, 2022. So essentially the weeks from Thanksgiving to the winter holidays, and only one application was received. And I know for our other committees, we receive, it's unusual to have only received one to me for such a notable issue. And so I'm simply asking that we reopen the vacancy and cast the net a little wider at a time when maybe more people are not so completely involved in holiday planning and travel and so on. It just seems like the worst possible window to recruit for any committee. And the fact that we got only one applicant, this is not a reflection of that applicant in any way. It's simply, we asked the committee to make a recommendation based on choosing from applications, and we have only one on such a critical topic. So I'm simply requesting that we spend a little more time and do another round of recruitment.
Thank you, Vice Chair Trieger. Director Gray, do you wish to respond?
You know, I think that the information that we have with us today, we don't have any information on the decision-making in terms of recommending this particular candidate, but do know that we followed the process that is laid out in the Lane manual. If there are any questions about that process, I have the folks from our contracting department who are here with us today to be able to answer that. The recruitment was posted for at least 30 calendar days, but certainly recognize that the time of the year could impact those who apply. I think that in the committee appointments that we've had in the past, there are times where we have robust applications and times where we have had to extend folks beyond typical term limits because we've been unable to recruit. So there seems to be quite a bit of a variation in terms of interest in committees in the community. But we will definitely, if it's the desire of this body for us to reopen and try to gather some additional applications, we can certainly take that direction and move forward in that way.
Thank you, Director Gray. To the board, any questions, comments? Commissioner Buck.
I'll just say that this isn't the only committee that's had this problem over the winter holidays. And it is exceptionally hard to find people that are focused on committees during that time. I don't think it's unique to this particular one, but it's a problem, and other committees are reopening also because of the same issue. So if that's a request, I'm certainly happy to support reopening and trying to get more interested parties. But I think we need to come to a solution about what we do when we try to recruit for critical committees during times when it's tough to get people's attention.
Thank you, Commissioner Buck. Further discussion? Commissioner Lovall.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. This particular individual that was selected for this committee, I was on that committee meeting when this particular individual was selected. And I have to say, the work of this individual is stellar. This person has been involved in community outreach, community organization, community advocacy for the homeless. He has toured and gotten involved with county councilors and city councilors and involved everybody he can, and 237 businesses in the loop of trying to solve the problem of mental health and our homeless problems in the county. This is one of the more involved people, I think, to date in the county system. And sometimes when you only get one person, maybe you get the best person. I want to also point out that there's many times when we have RFPs for housing and other things, there's only one applicant that applies and millions of dollars flows to that one applicant, which is in a nonprofit. So I don't see this as an issue or a problem. I think we got the best person out there, and I would support staying the course in this manner, and I wouldn't support reopening the application process.
Thank you, Commissioner Lovall. Further discussion? Vice Chair Trieger.
Just to be clear, the person who is being recommended at this point would absolutely be welcome to stay in the application pool. I'm not asking, again, as I mentioned at the top of my comments, this isn't about the person who applied. It's about just having a more robust, transparent, accessible process for the community.
Thank you, Vice Chair Trieger. And, I've been the liaison to that committee now for I'm on my 11th year as a liaison to that committee. I'm the longest serving member on that committee, even though I don't get a vote. And I don't participate in the discussions regarding the recommendations of the committee. I simply carry them when that happens. During those 11 years, and I'm not going to ask you to research this, but if I did ask you to research this, Mr. Mokrasky, you'd find that quite often we had 0 applicants for that committee. That is kind of normal it's really a strong committee, and there are large requirements, and it's a very serious committee that discusses very serious issues, many of which you don't have broad appeal in the community. People don't want to spend their spare time talking about the things that this committee talks about, because it's not the things you enjoy talking about at cocktail parties. It really isn't. This is a really hard-charging bottom line. How do we serve the people in our community who need the most deepest levels of service? So, Ms. Mokrasky, I'm not going to ask you to research it, but if you do research it, you'll find that sometimes we have no applicants. We have to recruit it. The committee has had to recruit applicants in the past. So I agree that having one applicant is not desirable. But I think if the contract folks step forward, they'd say that we went through the process, as we always do for every single committee, and the board itself had the discussion and unanimously, I believe, approved a recommendation of the Board of County Commissioners on this. My issue, or the concern that I have, is these people are spending a lot of their extra time. Many of them are professionals who have letters after the name, who bill by the hour, who are spending time on our committee, making recommendations to the Board of County Commissioners. Sometimes we listen, sometimes we don't. Sometimes we don't even hear the recommendations. So the point that I have here is that they've made a recommendation to us. They went through the process as they saw fit, and I'm not inclined to go against their recommendation at this point in time. Now, for future consideration, if we only have 1 applicant or 0 applicants, then perhaps that's a policy that we should have, that we reopen it. But on an ad hoc basis, when quite often in the past, we've only had 1 or less than 1 for not just this committee, but other committees, it seems like we're kind of singling out the Mental Health Advisory Committee at this point in time. So that being said, I'm inclined to support the recommendation of the Mental Health Advisory Local Alcohol and Drug Planning Committee and their chair, Dr. Grace Bullock, who I spoke with yesterday, because she hadn't heard until yesterday this item had been pulled from the agenda. And so I think at this point in time, let's look at it for the future. If we only have a single applicant, or if we have 0 applicants, or whatever arbitrary number we choose is the minimum number of applicants that we should have for a committee. And let's make it uniform. But by doing it at this point in time, it's lacking uniformity to the historical action this Board of County Commissioners has taken. Commissioner Buck.
Thank you, Chair. We do have an open committee assignment regarding committees, and it is really specified more about how we are trying to advertise and get out there to more diverse members of our community. I would suggest perhaps we expand that a little to ensuring that we are getting enough applicants applying per committee, and really doing our due diligence about advertising and getting the messaging out. Because in my earlier comments, this isn't the only one that's having this particular issue. So I would propose discussing that a little later on in assignments.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Then I'm going to add this also. There are 3 vacancies on that committee right now. We're at 1 applicant for 3 vacancies. So if we want to come up with a policy that this Board of Commissioners wants to uniformly apply to future applications for committees, I'm all in favor of that for the 2 remaining vacancies on the Mental Health Advisory Committee. So with that, any further discussion on this? Then I need a motion, please. And the motion can be one of 2 things. It can be to pass Order 230228-03, or it can be no motion at all, which is Vice Chair Trieger.
Thank you, Chair. I have a motion that's actually not either of those. I would simply move that we direct staff to reopen recruitment for vacancies on our Mental Health Advisory Committee in the name of greater transparency and community inclusion.
Moved by Vice Chair Trieger and seconded by Commissioner Buck. And I will say this, the applications are already open. We don't need a motion to open the applications because we have 2 vacancies remaining on that committee. So we don't need this motion, but we can vote on it. Am I accurate in that? I'm looking at the.
It sounds like this is the final, this is the final spot on this particular committee.
So the report that I got yesterday that shows 3 vacancies is inaccurate? Then disregard my comment regarding this report, which I'll toss away because it's inaccurate, right? Okay. All right. Then let's vote on the motion. The motion is to, can you repeat the motion, please, Vice Chair Trieger?
To repost the vacancy on the Mental Health Advisory Committee in an attempt to do a broader recruitment. And it's moved by Vice Chair Trieger and seconded by Commissioner Buck. I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye. Against?
Aye.
Passes 3-2. And I don't need to explain my vote. I don't believe that we're really shunting the process here. That we're slowing it down, probably inhibiting the work of the committee. But I understand what Vice Chair Trieger has asked for. And let's please, Mr. Mokrajewski, please, let's do this consistently in the future, not just ad hoc, which is the way it feels today. Thank you. All right, then we'll move on down the calendar. To Health and Human Services, we have item 6A, which is Order 23022806, in the matter approving an intergovernmental agreement to transfer real property at 599 East Broadway to Homes for Good and permanent supportive housing, and delegating authority to the county administrator to execute documents necessary to transfer the property. And today, Ms. Mokrajewski, I'll let you introduce your panel, which I know is already here, and I'll state that 2 of your commissioners are on the board of Homes for Good, but I don't personally perceive this as even a potential conflict of interest. So please, Ms. Mokrajewski.
Eve Gray, our Director of Health and Human Services, will walk you through this item.
Sure. So this particular property is one of the so-called COVID hotels, which became a wildfire hotel, which is now ready to serve its next purpose in life. So we are advocating to work with Homes for Good in order to convert these hotel units into permanent supportive housing for the next phase of service to our community as wildfire survivors are transferred out of this hotel into other permanent housing options. So you'll see in the packet that there is hope that funding for permanent supportive housing will come through in the near term. If for some reason that weren't to be the case, Homes for Good has continued to commit to operating this facility as a shelter facility until such time as it would have to be closed in order for the conversion to happen, to become permanent supportive housing and then reopened for that purpose. So happy to answer any questions that you have on the proposal here.
Thank you. And I'll open the floor for questions. Commissioner Buck.
I don't necessarily have a question, but just a comment. This is actually a pretty exciting item to have on our agenda today. Knowing that this was a project turnkey facility, and for the new commissioners who may not have been around, that was a project through the Association of Counties and the legislatures in order to house victims of the wildfire, the 2020 Labor Day wildfires. And so it has been diligently housing wildfire victims ever since. Over time, we've been able to house many of them. Others have moved. Others have found other housing on their own. And the few remaining left are in an alternate hotel at the moment. So I want to ensure that this action is still facilitating and making sure that those wildfire victims are actually still being served. So there's been no change in our diligence and concern about those victims, but it is very few now, luckily. And this is now, it has been planned for some time and now has come to fruition to make this permanent supportive housing in conjunction with Homes for Good as they've been rolling out the several new permanent supportive housing facilities. And we couldn't have done this if Project Turnkey had not been facilitated and passed with the efforts of AOC, the Association of Counties, and the state legislature at the time in their long session shortly thereafter the Labor Day fires. And I'm wholeheartedly supportive and pretty excited to see this action happen today.
Thank you, Commissioner Buck. Further discussion? Commissioner Laval.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask, was there any other parties involved in getting this organization or this particular property transferred? Was there any other applicants besides just Homes for Good?
So I am not familiar with that part of the process. I don't know if either of you happen to be. Homes for Good is our housing authority. So they are typically the body that we work with for permanent supportive housing just because they have access to the funds associated with that. But beyond that, in terms of, I'm not aware that there was an RFP, but I would have to go back and confirm.
The other thing I'm kind of also concerned about, being a landlord and a property owner myself, is are we responsible as a county for transitional costs for people who have stayed there past the 3-month period that legally makes them a contractual resident of a certain property? So are we going to be paying for transitional, like in the housing authorities right now, when a landlord wants to remodel or sell or do one of 4 reasons, they have to give those people a certain amount of money for rent and transition costs? Are we going to be responsible for any of that?
So for permanent supportive housing, there are a couple of pathways that we typically follow for that. One is for individuals who have a permanent disability who will permanently require supportive services and housing. Those individuals we would expect would stay in some sort of permanent supportive housing development permanently, and that the funding that we have just for supportive services, PSH would be I'll just use that acronym, but it's permanent supportive housing. So typically the county is the continuum of care, accesses funding for services in our PSH facilities, and that would be ongoing for that population. There's another group of folks who just need stabilizing within PSH, and over time, as they become better and ready, they can move on to other housing options. And part of the services that we provide within PSH includes intensive case coordination and assistance with transitioning onto those permanent locations. So I don't know that in any of the permanent supportive housing facilities that we have today, we've encountered any kind of need to notice folks, aside from eviction, that we needed them to move on to do something different, because we've been able to coordinate that with them as part of what we normally provide.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Lovell, for the discussion. Commissioner Buck, you had your hand raised.
Thank you. I just have some answers for your previous questions, because this project actually occurred before Director was in this position. So Project Turnkey, I believe, became part of the county and Homes for Good before you arrived on the scene. So it's slightly unfair to be able to ask you these questions. When Project Turnkey occurred and Oregon Housing and Community Services facilitated the acquisition of that facility, Homes for Good was the one agency that stepped up in order to help facilitate that and hold it as an entity. And at the time, lots of other nonprofit and for-profit agencies were doing everything and anything they could for wildfire victims at the time. So we were lucky enough to get a Project Turnkey project at all. And so they have held it, Homes for Good has held it ever since that acquisition. And when it comes to the funding of the folks that have been in it and have transitioned to another hotel, those operational costs have been borne by the Department of Human Services through federal and state funding. So that funding isn't additional money out of the county's pocket. It has been funded through wildfire funding. So just to alleviate any concerns as if there's any additional costs for the county in order to do this, I don't see that there is.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners. Further discussion? All right, good discussion. Thank you for bringing this forward, Director Gray. Do I have a motion? Commissioner Buck.
I'll move order 23-02-28-06 as presented.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Buck and seconded by Vice Chair Trigger. Discussion to the motion. I'm seeing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Passes unanimously. Order 2302-26-06. Moving on to item B, which is order 2302-2807, in the matter of approving one contract, two amendments, and one grant application, delegating authority to the county administrator to sign the approved actions. And once again, Director Gray.
Thank you. So several of these amendments are related to energy assistance and rental assistance. There is one exciting contract, which is around Aid and Assist and having Columbia Care staff our secure residential treatment facility cottages in Junction City. Those cottages we acquired some time ago, I think close to a year ago, and have been unable to staff the facilities, which has impacted our ability to move folks out of the state hospital. So this contract will really help increase capacity for step down from the state hospital, and then a grant application related to the community health centers. Happy to answer any questions on that.
Thank you, Director. Any questions? I'm seeing none.
I have one, just, sorry,
Commissioner
Chair.
Lovell.
On this particular order, 07, how many folks is that going to serve? Do you have a number on that, just out of curiosity?
For the secure residential treatment?
No, the one from Columbia Care. How many from the Columbia Care Services one in particular?
Yes, so that cottage is 8 beds. And folks will move in and out of those beds as they move on to, typically they would step down into some sort of residential treatment facility or other treatment facility.
So just help me understand the number a little bit. You're saying it's 8 beds at $4.7 million? Is that correct? Is that what it's going to cost for 8 beds?
For the term of the contract, it will, and I would have to go back and look at the term of the contract itself. These are very expensive facilities to run. They are less expensive than the state hospital per bed, but outside of the state hospital, it is the most expensive form of treatment that we can provide to individuals with mental illness, and is only used for folks who have to be kept in a locked facility, which certainly is not a high number, but it's a very acute number, and potentially folks who are dangerous to the community.
So what do you think the percentage of those kinds of folks are compared to the kinds of folks we may encounter in the future with the stabilization center we're planning?
Well, stabilization center is intended mostly to be a prevention mechanism. So how many folks will we be able to catch who won't escalate to that point? I can't answer that question really, but we certainly hope that we can, through having greater access to prevention in our community, the intent, the plan is that we have fewer people who become this severely mentally ill. That said, you know, this is a disability just like anything, and at times drugs and methamphetamine in particular are impacting our ability to prevent folks from escalating into that kind of permanent disabling psychosis. So it's a complex issue, but the stabilization center will certainly help us to catch some folks who hopefully won't go that far.
Well, do you think we'll also face some of the obstacles you're facing now with staffing? You're saying right now you're unable to staff. And are we talking about 8 beds unable to staff, and we're talking about a stabilization center? We're looking at some staffing hurdles that seem rather large in my view. Is that accurate?
Yes, that's correct. We have a meeting this Friday with a number of folks within the community, agencies, universities, representative from the OHA. We've invited various officials to be talking about how we do a better job of creating a behavioral health pipeline within our community. There are, of course, some very important bills in the state legislature right now that could help to fund those efforts. But workforce is a big area of focus that we need to keep our eyes on.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to make sure we don't over-promise and under-deliver to our constituents on what we're working on.
Thank you, Commissioner. For the discussion, Vice Chair Trigger.
Thank you, Chair. I just, while the conversation was happening, pulled up the packet. It looks like it's a 4-year term. So it's about $1 million a year for 8 people, high acuity, 24/7 operations, staffing including things like meals and housekeeping, as well as high skill level behavioral health positions. So just for Commissioner, so it's about $1 million a year for 8 people, 24/7. I'm not sure I put the right number of zeros in on my calculator, so I'm not going to say what 1 million divided by 8 is, but it brings that number, maybe brings the blood pressure down a little bit on what that number translates to.
Easy,
Yes,
125,000.
125, that's what I thought, but I wasn't going to say it into the record without $125,000 a year. So as I often say, right, humans are expensive, but we're worth it. So thank you.
Thank you. Good discussion. Further discussion? Then let's see, do I have a motion? No, I'll call for the motion, please. Vice Chair Trigger.
Chair, I'll move approval of Order 23-02-28-07 in the matter of approving 1 contract, 2 amendments, and 1 grant application, delegating authority to County Administrator to sign the approved actions.
It's moved by Vice Chair Trigger and seconded by Commissioner Buck. Order 23-02-28-07. Discussion to the motion? I'm seeing none. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously. And Director Gray, ever so briefly, not to graze my cattle on an exhausted pasture or beat a dead horse, back to the report that I cited. This was accurate as of January 1st this year. This was last year's report, which did have 3 vacancies on the Mental Health Advisory Committee at the time, 2 of which were filled by 2 applicants for 3 positions. The board approved 2 applicants for 3 positions at the time, and now we're not approving 1 applicant for 1 position. So, for the record, thank you. All right, then let's move down the agenda. Thank you, Director Gray, and thank you for your staff for the great reports. To County Council. Welcome, Ms. Pettigrew.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, Commissioners. Very nice to see you all today. In addition to our robust legal practice in the Office of Legal Counsel of doing general counsel work and litigation, we also have some larger projects in store for this year. One is working on our practice management tools, both modernizing them and increasing our tools for transparency and efficiency so that we can improve the visibility of our work and as well as the timeliness of that work, both for the community and our clients here in the county. Another thing we've been working on is filling our vacancies. We have 2 open Assistant County Counsel positions, and I'm very delighted to share with you today that we have filled one of those 2 positions. Ms. Rebecca Dorman has decided to join Lane County, and we are very honored to have her join us in April. She has been doing land use work as well as tax work for many, many years. She has an incredible depth of knowledge in municipal law. She currently teaches with University of Oregon. She has a background in planning herself, has served as a planner in the city of Eugene, as well as provided counsel to the League of Oregon Cities. She has proven to be a great leader in this area. And again, we are just so honored by her choice to join this team. And I hope you will join me in welcoming her in April when she arrives. Thank you.
Thank you for that report, Council. Discussion, any questions for Council Pettigrew? I'm seeing none. Thank you for the report, and congratulations on the filling of a position. That spreads the workload a little bit more evenly, and thank you very much. We'll move along to County Administration, and Ms. Mokraczki, we now have 8A, which is Order 2302-2808, in the matter of approving the Charter Review Committee amended bylaws and presentation of the draft work plan. And Ms. Mokraczki, I'll permit you or ask you, require you.
Yes, thank
Close
you.
you.
We're a little early for the 10 a.m. time certain.
Oh, that's right, this is the
If you're
10 a.m. time
okay
certain. So
taking that, do you want to take that item?
actually, I just downloaded a Rod Stewart album. You want to listen to some music?
So I'll introduce.
I'll ask you and your staff if it's okay to move forward. And I don't know that anyone is in the audience waiting specifically for the 10 a.m. time certain. So your pleasure, Mr. Mokraczki.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I'll introduce Jenna Cusimano, our interim community and economic development manager here. And Jenna, why don't you take it away and do the introduction to this item?
Good morning, Chair Farr, Vice Chair Trieger, Commissioners. As Mr. Mokraczki mentioned, I am currently the interim manager for Community and Economic Development. I'm also a staff liaison for our Charter Review Committee. With me, I also have Morgan Monroe, the chair of the Charter Review Committee. To give some background for the new commissioners, a 1958 amendment to the Oregon Constitution reserved Oregon County voters the right to adopt charters prescribing how their county government should be organized, what powers they should have, and what procedure they should follow in administering county affairs. The Lane County Charter was approved by voters in 1962. In 2010, Lane County voters approved an amendment to the charter directing the Board of Commissioners to convene a charter review committee with the purpose of reviewing and recommending any changes or updates to the existing charter every 10 years. Last July in 2022, the board directed staff to begin the process of convening a charter review committee and solicited applications during the month of August. Each of the 5 commissioners at that time selected an appointee, and from the resulting pool of 12 candidates. Those appointments were made by the board on October 11th, 2022. Those 5 appointed members met in early November to identify 2 of the remaining candidates to nominate to the board for the at-large positions, and those were subsequently appointed as a whole by the board on December 6th. The committee met and discussed revisions to the committee bylaws, which they approved at their January 27th meeting and are included in the board packet for your review. The changes that they discussed and moved forward consist primarily of removing specificity around meeting times to allow flexibility for this and future charter review committees, and better aligning the role of staff as noted in Lane Manual Chapter 3. Any changes to committee bylaws need to be submitted to legal counsel and the board for review and approval as outlined in the attached board order, which is before you now for any discussion and votes for approval. After that action, we will be discussing some of their proposed work plan items.
Thank you, Ms. Cusimano. Questions at this point in time? I see none at this point in time, so proceed. Or are we ready for the motion?
If you are acceptable to it, we'd prefer you to vote on this motion because the work plan isn't part of the vote.
Got it. And then we'll continue with the, then I'll ask for a motion, please. Vice Chair Trieger.
Chair will move approval of Order 23-02-28-08 in the matter of approving the Charter Review Committee amended bylaws and presentation of draft work plan.
I'll second it.
Moved by Vice Chair Trigger and seconded by Commissioner Lovall. Any discussion to the motion? We'll take action. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Passes unanimously. Back to you.
Thank you so much. So County Council did review the process for the committee as outlined in the Lane County Charter. Council confirmed that to remain in compliance with that process, the Charter Review Committee should complete their work within 1 year following their initial appointment, which would be October 11th of this year, 2023. If the board asks the committee to perform any additional tasks following submission of those recommendations, the committee has up to 1 additional year in which they can complete those tasks, which is 2 years from the formation of the committee and would be October 11th, 2024. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to our Chair Morgan, who has a draft work plan from the committee to present and walk you through.
Hello, and thank you for the opportunity to present to you today and also to work on this topic. This is a really important job that we've been honored with as our committee members. This is a big piece of what helps our county be successful. It's the policy, not the policy. Wait, what's my right word? It's like the bylaws. It's the charter, right? And so it's that space to look at it and to look it over and make sure that it still works for our community. I mean, we're taking that really serious and we're looking into it. We've got some amazing presentations from county staff that have been really helpful and informative. And also we're obviously taking public comment along the way every single time. And you'll see on the work plan that we break out some of the work that we're looking at into housekeeping and substantive, and that's part of the way the bylaws were written. It lets us take a look at what are some of the pieces that might be maybe more administrative, and then if other things come up, we have some time with that. We'll have, it is our intent to bring you our draft recommendations long before October, because we want to make sure that you all have a chance to weigh in, and also that the public has a chance to really get involved and weigh in if we have recommendations and with whatever they are. So I welcome any questions you have or any advice you have. If there have been topics that you've thought about or talked about in previous meetings that you'd want to make sure our committee reviews, we would love to know what they are so that we can make sure to review those meetings or those conversations.
Excellent. Chair Morgan, thank you. And can we start calling this the Magnificent Charter? No, okay, we won't. Very good. Discussion to the presentation. Well, I guess we were this is not a big issue, right? Wait a second, this is a huge issue.
Well, it means that you like the plan. I'll take it.
We do like the plan.
Good, thank you.
Please continue.
Great. Anything else?
Well, that's it.
That's it. It was an easy item.
No, let's generate some discussion because this really is a big issue. And thank you for stepping forward and chairing the committee. It's not going to be easy work. It's going to be very detailed work, and it's not going to be without criticism of the work that you do. You understand that? That whatever you do, whatever you say, whatever you recommend, there are going to be people who say they're wrong about that. So we're looking forward to that discussion because this really is a chance for everybody in Lane County to take a look at how do we operate, what are the basic rules that we absolutely abide by, because these are the rules of the charter. These aren't administrative rules, you know, these aren't a single ordinance that we pass. This is the charter that we operate all government by, including redistricting, including how we hire the administrator, including how we serve as commissioners and how long we serve and where we serve from. So this is a big deal. And even though we have very little discussion from the Board of County Commissioners, look forward to plenty of discussion as your work progresses. So thank you very much. I do have a quick question, if I may. And this is one I'm kind of reserving. Each commissioner appointed 1 charter committee member, and then the charter committee itself chose 2 members. How many applicants were there for those 2 memberships?
So we had utilized the same pool of applicants from the initial appointment. So it was a total of 12 applications that were received. Of that, you all had appointed 5. So there was 7 remaining, although 1 candidate did withdraw themselves. So there was a remaining 6 to choose from those 2 slots.
So we didn't reopen, we just used the existing pool, presuming that nobody else wanted to be considered. Okay, Then, and the two names, how were the two names chosen? Was that by a democratic vote of the committee? Okay.
Yes, that was a discussion and then a vote.
And I see that those two names are Sarai Johnson, a former county employee, and Kevin Cronin. Excellent. Okay, very
There
good.
was very robust discussion about determining how to make sure there was adequate representation and diversity on the committee. So there was a couple different rounds where they were going between a few different names beyond those two, and then they, by consensus, narrowed it down to the two that you ultimately appointed, and it ended up being a unanimous decision by the committee.
Excellent. Thank you for your work on this. That's not been easy for you either, because you're right and heard on it. And it's not always been easy. Even getting those first 5 names wasn't that easy, was it?
It's a process for sure.
Excellent. Well, then, with that, we'll move along down the agenda. Thank you very much for being here this morning. Thank you for the work so far and the work to come. We'll right on. We'll move down to, well, our 10 o'clock time certain, Mr. Mokraski, ended at 10 o'clock. That's pretty certain. Well done.
Traveling back in time.
So we'll move down to item 8B, which is a report from Travel Lane County. It's a semi-annual report, and today we have Carrie Westland, and I see that Andy Babora is here. I usually make some comment about linebackers in the University of Oregon All-Star football team, but I'll reserve that for some time during the...
We did notice, Chair Farr, that the duck is missing. So this was noted by Mr. Vabora, that the duck is,
Relocated.
oh, it's not?
It's relocated. You have
Okay,
to
good
find
to
it.
know.
Yeah.
Where's Waldo?
That's fantastic. Okay, that we might have to linger after.
Welcome to Find the Ducky, also known as County Commissioner meetings.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Ms. Westland, thank you for being here, and before we start, my apology, I've been on your board now for 10 years.
It's in my notes.
Okay, then I'll not say any more. I
Yeah.
was first appointed to your board in 1995 when it's called Steve Alco, so
That's right.
please.
You might have even served as a city councilor, right?
I was a city councilor.
Yeah,
yes.
okay, well, thank you. I am Carrie Westland, President and CEO of Travel Lane County, and I want to just thank you for the opportunity to present this semi-annual report. It's one of 2 formal reports that we provide to you each year. And we typically have a few folks in the room with us, staff and board, but we had all of them sequestered in a room for most of the day on Friday. And so it's just Andy and I this morning. The first half of the program year, which began in July with the successful hosting of the World Athletics Championships, resulted in a record-setting month of $2.6 million of transient lodging tax collections, an all-time record, maybe almost twice the previous record. Since July, in the fall and coming into winter, we've experienced some softening in hotel occupancy rates. As we compare to, it's so interesting how related everything is, because we're comparing to a year previous when we had some very intense hotel usage for traveling nurses and wildfire recovery victims. So this softening in the revenues and occupancy rates has made that record-setting month of July a really important start to the program year that we are in right now. Macroeconomic signals are mixed. It's interesting when we listen to national economists and we're looking ahead to see what's going to happen in the future. Travel sentiment in the United States remains very, very strong. And as we look at the current statistics around hotel use, and we're sort of teasing out who real visitors are in those hotels versus the softening from emergency use of hotel rooms in the previous year, we're actually feeling really good about travel demand. But we're also hearing what you're all hearing about increasing costs and increasing personal debt. And so we have some worries as we sort of look ahead and try and project what will happen. We have budgeted, we're in the budgeting process now for FY24. And so we're budgeting transient lodging tax collections flat in the program year that begins in July. We budgeted the current year at a 2.9% growth rate, and we're hoping we make that partly on the basis of that strong July start, and then we're hoping we can maintain some momentum. So we're feeling pretty positive, but we're also being careful in how we look ahead, and we're often looked to by the other program recipients of transient lodging tax as they start to set their budget. So I just wanted to kind of give you a sense of what we see in the future. Our mission is growing overnight stays for a year-round, vibrant local economy. And as we look at results from the first half of the program year, our programs that are focused on our 3 target markets of vacationers, sports events, and conventions are showing growth in key leading metrics. So that's all good news. The programs are working well, and we're feeling good about our staff teams' sales and marketing acumen, the implementation of our programs, and the results, which are all pointing to future visitors and visitor spending. Our programs that work in support of our 3 target market teams and also work in support of our destination partners and communities also had success in the first half of the year. We work to meet our mission while also meeting the values and expectations of the destination that we serve. And we consider 3 key filters as we're prioritizing the investments we make of time, energy, and dollars into tactics. And those filters include accessibility, DEI, and sustainability. Within the filter of accessibility, and as part of our destination development work in service to community priorities and improving our readiness as a destination for the growing number of people who require some sort of physical, cognitive, or emotional accommodation, we have secured a grant from Travel Oregon to boost dollars that we budgeted internally to amplify the work of the Lane Loop Committee by underwriting the installation of hearing loops at accommodations and attractions. So you've been hearing for the last couple of years about the great work that this committee, that's co-chaired by Ginevra Ralph at the Shed and Sue Pritchard, of getting more and more spaces in the community throughout the county really looped for people who have T-coils in their hearing aids and then can really be better served. And so we're helping with that work. And that's one of the things that we're addressing within that accessibility filter. We have always worked to, and continue to make progress in ensuring that all visitors feel welcome here. Our communications tools of photography, video, content blogs are robust, and they reflect a wide array of prospective visitors with a goal of creating a warm welcome and sense of inclusion. We've continued to rebuild dues-paying partnerships from the pandemic low, because we did have a lot of drop-off, and we're welcoming new and returning partners and rebuilding awareness of our programs and how individual businesses and organizations can leverage them. And within the filter of sustainability, that's shown up strongly through our content and work, from the Leave No Trace principles that we incorporate when we're talking about visitors accessing our trails, to the sustainable practices that are built into the hosting of sports events and conventions. A quick look and recap of industry indicators reinforces my earlier message around TLT collections, and you can see that July spike there, and current hotel indicators that we watch closely as a measurement of broader economic health for the hospitality sector overall. We typically bring you 6 months of actual TLT collections, but we're right in the middle of that shift from monthly collections and distribution to quarterly through the Department of Revenue. So we have a bit of a data lag as we get into that new distribution pattern. And here you see the first 3 months of actuals as compared to the last 3 years beginning in the summer of 2019. So you can see those pandemic impacts and how we have rebounded in those first 3 months of the program year. And then in the middle is a sense of how key hotel indicators received from Smith Travel Research compared to last year for specific cities, with Eugene being about half of all of our transient lodging tax collections, and Springfield another 25 to 27%, Florence around 8% of lodging collections. We just launched, just last week, an updated design of our highly successful website, and now it's even more inspirational and more inclusive, and so we want to make sure that you go and take a look at it at eugenecascadescoast.org. An earlier slide shared that we have hosted 788,000 visits to that website, by 622,000 unique individuals in the first 6 months of the program year, both good growth rates over previous years. And our site is well used by residents of Lane County as well as visitors for all kinds of useful information, from restaurants, retail, and events to hiking trails, skiing, and fishing. I just did a presentation to the Leadership Eugene Springfield group a couple of weeks ago, and I was introducing tourism and the indicators, and I asked who in the room had been to our website, and I think out of 30 people, 2 had not been to our website. So we know it's beloved by residents as well as visitors. Given that we do have a couple of new commissioners, I did want to spend some time talking about our governance at Travel Lane County. We are governed by 30 voting board members, and we have 9 advisory ex officio members on the board as well. The bylaws of Travel Lane County were rewritten in the early 1990s as a public-private partnership in governance with direct input from Lane County as you agreed to become our primary direct funder under an increase at the time of 2 points in the countywide TLT. The ultimate outcome of the restructuring and discussion with industry and cities placed our funding at 2.1 points of transient lodging tax, which is 70% of your visitor services fund. And out of that fund, the Lane History Museum funding comes out as 10% of that. So now we're at 80%. Another 10% slice was originally tourism special projects and now goes into economic development for tourism-related projects at the discretion of the team. And then the last 10% fund goes out to your rural communities on a pro rata basis. So that's your visitor services fund, and our contract comes out of at 70% of that at 2.1 points. The great thing that this has done for us is provided us stability. We had 3 budget presentations to 3 jurisdictions previous to that. So now we come to you for our funding. It gives us the ability to vision and strategize over longer periods of time. Many of our contracts are multi-year contracts. And it gives us an incentive because the better job we do at investing transient lodging tax in growing lodging tax, the more money we get to invest into that process. So it's almost a private entrepreneurial kind of carrot for us to keep us focused on mission. The Board of County Commissioners is currently represented by Commissioner Lovell after a decade of participation by Commissioner Farr. You also have a voting staff member on our board in Corey Buller, who's the director of the Lane Event Center. County Administrator Steve Mokrahysky and Jenna Cusimano, who just presented to you from Economic Development, Community and Economic Development, also serve as ex officio board members. The 2 metro cities have formal liaisons to their elected councils, along with staff in ex officio seats. And the city of Florence has ex officio representation. And then we have geographic representatives called for in our bylaws to just make sure that there are perspectives in our boardroom from across the county. These details and history help explain our sense of responsibility and stewardship to all of Lane County as a destination, and to you, the Board of County Commissioners, as our primary funder. Since 2016, we've been operating on a rolling 3-year grant, so when I come and present the annual report each fall, I request a 1-year extension to that grant, which takes it back to a 3-year term. That gives us an early indicator if there are any problems, gives us time to resolve those issues, and enables us to maintain that long-term perspective. On Friday, as I mentioned earlier, we held an extended work session with our board with robust discussions that will be reflected in a 3-year strategic plan that is being drafted right now and will be adopted this spring. It will align with your plan and priorities, and we'll make sure to share it with you as it is developed. I'm sure facility development for both sports and conventions will continue to be a theme, and hopefully over the next couple of months, we will have learned more about the future of the Lane Event Center as our plan is being drafted. For us, facility development also includes smaller projects like improvements at Dexter Lake so that we can hold competitive crewing events there. And Andy's really made some great progress on getting some key improvements done at Dexter. Or a pump track, as is under discussion in Oak Ridge. So we're working with community tourism committees across the county and and working their priorities and visions into our plan as they're relevant to tourism development as well. So that's just a very brief touch base here at the semi-annual report period. I'm happy to answer any questions and wanted to leave time to discuss any topics that you might want to discuss. And thank you again for the opportunity to provide this quick mid-year report, as well as for your ongoing support of our economic development work within the tourism sector.
Thank you. Thank you, Carrie Westland. I was going to say Director Westland, Executive Director Westland.
Chair Farr, you just call me whatever you'd like.
Carrie, thanks very much for being here today. You know, I think back in 1995 or 96, I think I might have been on the board that hired you originally.
Bobby Green.
Bobby Green, but
That's
when
the
I was
county.
city councilor.
Yeah, you were on the city council, yeah.
I'd replaced Bobby Green on the city council.
Yeah, well, thank you. I appreciate that very much.
You're welcome, everybody. So very good. Do we have any questions or comments? I will state that your website reads like a magazine. I mean, it's a beautiful, like a magazine you want to lay on your coffee table. So
Thank you.
Not-
As it should. That's a standard you should hold us to, so glad you feel good about it.
then Commissioner Seneca.
Yeah, did you say pump track in Oak Ridge?
Yeah, they're talking about a pump track, which is, you know, for those months that you can't get out on the mountain biking trails, this would give really residents of all ages, but a kind of a focus on youth in the community, the ability to do some obstacles. And it's kind of like a BMX track, but typically a pump track, you might have to help me with this, Andy.
Yeah, it's a hard surface so that it can stand up in the winter and gives people opportunities to work on their mountain biking skills.
There's something special about you're either pedaling or not pedaling on these pump tracks. Pedaling?
Pumping, I guess.
Yeah, there's like a little, that's what I got a little bit confused about. But yeah, it's an
I was
attribute
curious.
that they're talking about in the industrial park in Oak Ridge.
All right. That was just caught my ear. What about agritourism and the movement there?
Yes.
Where are we at with that?
Well, also within our overall bucket of destination development and product development, as we see it, which is really readiness for visitors, we have food and beverage trails. And so what we tend to do around agritourism is link experiences that are in rural Lane County to help guide visitors to those spots that are open and ready and available to them. So we're pretty active in the food and beverage sector for sure, because we have great clean water and great fertile soils, and those are producing things that we all love to eat and drink. And so we're helping visitors connect with those experiences as well. We do have a couple of partners that offer farm stays. Land use laws in Oregon create a bit of a hurdle for that, so there aren't a lot of those kinds of opportunities, but there are some, and where they exist, we're helping connect visitors to those experiences as well.
Are we actively trying to encourage agritourism at the state level? Because I know there's a lot of land use issues with it.
I have served on a couple of big look task forces in the 26 years that I have been here, so yes, we do our best to keep track of all those discussions going on, and when there's an opportunity to serve on broader policy, we do. I have to say it's really challenging to reduce the barriers for private landowners to engage in tourism commerce on rural lands. Our land use system just creates some natural barriers to get that done, and there are a lot of perspectives that go into creating our land use system. And an interesting example of this is rural lodging, even within our own county. So you have to get to a certain number of rooms in order to really make an investment commercially viable, and it's pretty challenging to do that within the current land use system. So I'll keep it at that simple level, but I'm sure you all can follow what I'm talking about.
I would just add that, and I can send you the link, that our agritourism trails that were created here in the South Willamette Valley were part of the Travel Oregon Agritourism Studio process, and they are throughout the state. So Travel Oregon has invested heavily in agritourism trails, and I can send you that link. There's some just spectacular opportunities around the state to enjoy the farms and such.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Further discussion? Commissioner Buck.
I'm really excited that it looks like stabilization has happened since the pandemic. That's just really excellent news. I'm also really excited to hear about how you're you're able to support the hearing loops in various locations around Lane County. I have family members that are hard of hearing, and sometimes what they'll do is just withdraw and not go out and not participate, even though they really, really want to. But if they can't hear and they ask people to scream what's going on, it's just not a happy experience. And I'd love to get hearing loops in here too. I mean, it does cost money, but this is something.
Not that much. I'd like Andy
good to
just to
hear.
give you a brief overview of, because he's our project lead on this, and it's very exciting.
Yeah, we're rolling out the first 5, and working with the Loop Lane Committee, we talked about what should be our priorities, and we settled on accommodations and attractions. Those interactions at the front desks of hotels are really important and touch a lot of our visitors. So that's kind of our priority to get started with. So I'm working with Alco Hotels locally just to get the process working with the contractor and our billing and everything worked out before I roll it out to our full partnership. So we've got their 5 hotels, which should be looped here in the next few weeks. I've also approved working with the Shelton McMurphy Johnson House on mobile units that they're going to use for tours within their facility. They had a grant and they needed a little bit more to just finish that project up. So those will be the first 2. So we'll have some accommodations and 1 attraction. So we'll get our feet wet and then we'll roll it out to the rest of our partnerships. So we have $20,000. Just to give you an example, a front desk hotel situation with the microphone and the signage that goes with this unit is about $1,200. And so what we're offering to our partners is we'll cover 80% of that with the money we budgeted and with the Travel Oregon grant. So we're hoping to get 50 to 70 plus locations looped in this first year. Certainly those costs go up when you talk about larger facilities, but Hearing Support Solutions, who's the local contractor that Loop Lane works with, he's super knowledgeable about this. He can make an assessment and give you the cost. There's a couple different ways to loop the entire space, or depending on the size, they have to lay down a grid underneath the flooring. And that's the key, is usually it's done with a remodel. That's the best time to do it, because if you're gonna have your flooring taken up, but in a room this size, my guess is he might be able to tell you that you can just go around the cove base and put the loop in and you guys would be set. So we can certainly hook you up with Alan. He's phenomenal. He's doing work all over the state. And we're looking forward to rolling these out over the coming year.
And we're lucky to have him, because at the national level, we serve on a national accessibility board called Travel Ability. So it's focused on the intersection between accessibility and tourism. But the installers is where the rub is. There just really aren't that many of them. So we're lucky to have one based right here. So we have the 20,000 that we budgeted and 50,000 that we received from Travel Oregon as a grant. So that's what we're investing in this first phase.
Excellent. I hope our facilities is listening to this meeting. I would be thrilled to be able to see hearing loops in many of our facilities. Thank you, Chair.
Right on. Thank you, Commissioner. Further discussion? Vice Chair Trieger? Nope. Then a couple of things from me really quickly. Your website shows 19 waterfalls. Beautiful pictures of 19. That's presuming Sweet Creek is only one fall, but it's actually a series of falls. I've only been to like 15 of them, and I live in Lane County for
I'm
all these
shocked to
years.
hear that. I thought you were going to tell me I missed some.
No,
Well, we can
well,
fix
you
you
might
up.
have.
We'll help you find those others.
You missed the one in my backyard, but it's only 3 feet tall. So. But, it really is a world of adventure just opening the website. And I compare it to what we saw 10 years ago when we were beginning to really, when I say we, I can say we because I got to watch you do it. Beginning to really make this website something that is interesting to people all over the world to look at what happens here in Lane County. It really does attract people to Lane County. But one thing I wanted to say about you in particular, the years that you've been here, you've walked the tightrope so very, very well, and you're able to communicate effectively with just about any audience that is listening to you, and I really commend you for that.
Well, I appreciate that. I do tend to get myself in trouble once in a while, but I somehow get myself back out.
If you didn't, then you would not be an effective executive director. So,
Thank you, sir.
And you really are on point for so many different issues, and I really want to thank you for my 10 years of service with you on that.
Well, it's my honor to serve. We live in a beautiful place, and we have many unique communities, and their needs and their interests and their dreams are different from one another. So it's a very dynamic job. It's a challenging job, but it's also a super rewarding job. And our entire team is really honored to serve. And we thank you for your support and the opportunity to provide this service.
And you can attest to the fact that this Board of County Commissioners has always been a strong supporter. We had some hard discussions regarding the contract about 9 years ago. Got through that, and now we have the rolling contract that really gives you the stability that you need to operate the organization. And the stability that you see in your board of directors. You know, you've got, how long's Dana Terrell been there now?
I can't answer, don't ask me
Since
specific
before I
questions
got
like
here.
that, but I do know that Mike Drennan is the longest serving board member, so he's been on the long, he was there when I got here and he's still on, so.
And like Commissioner Trieger and I, both Mike and Dana have food for Lane County roots.
That's right.
Well, you know, once again, the work that you've done through the years has been pretty remarkable in attracting people and giving people not only the news that we like to hear, but the news that we have to hear that we don't always like to hear. So that's very good. And one thing I want to say to the board about the tactfulness that Gary Westland engages in, talking about Oregon land use laws. There are a lot of perspectives that go into our land use laws. Well said. Ms. Mokrowski, anything that you'd like to add?
No.
Then with that, thank you for everything. And number 51, right? 51? 51. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, and I have a follow-up with some of you on the indoor facility, so you'll be hearing from me, those of you who've asked for meetings.
The what now again? Never mind. I think we have a meeting this Thursday on that. Right. We do. Thank you. So much. Then we'll move down the agenda, Mr. Mokrowski, to item 8C, which is announcements.
I don't have any announcements unless you have questions for me.
Anything
We do have we're hoping for about an hour for the executive session today. I know it's scheduled for 45 minutes. We wanted to make sure that we had time to end by noon so that you have a break.
Okay, very good. Before we go into the next executive session at 1 o'clock, 1:30, right?
Correct. Yeah, you have a morning exec session and then at 1:30 exec session.
1:30 after an executive session. Then moving down to Commissioners' announcements. Any announcements from the Board of Commissioners? Future board assignment requests. Now, the reason we're going through this is because when we read into executive session today, we, in all likelihood, will not be coming out into regular session until tomorrow. That is discounting the 6 o'clock joint meeting that we have this evening. So any assignments? Commissioner Buck.
Thank you, Chair. So the first one, as I mentioned earlier today, would be for the board to make a public statement on anti-Semitism, hate and bias in conjunction with our equity manager. And you as the chair would most likely, sign and make that statement public. But it would be on behalf of the entire board. So I would like to get head nods for that and that you could be able to do that expeditiously.
Looking for head nods or any questions, comments on that? The last time such a statement was made, it was right out there, right through that window on that curved arch right there in the Free Speech Plaza, and it attracted quite an audience, a rather large number of people. We would hope that should that come to pass, based on head nods and based on Mr. Mokrowski's comments, then we'd make it an event. So, Ms. Mokrowski.
I just want to offer that the board in 2020, particularly for the new commissioners, adopted a board order. I'm just looking to see, we have the order number on here. I'm not, in the document that I have, I don't have the order number, but in 2020, the board adopted this board order that says, in the now therefore, the board supports being a welcoming, inclusive, and safe community for everyone who lives, learns, works and plays in Lane County. We condemn actions that promote hate, xenophobia, racism, white supremacy, white nationalism, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, homophobia, transphobia, ableism, sexism, and other forms of bigotry. That we recognize, that the board recognizes the importance of elected officials responding publicly when groups or individuals experience hate and bias in order for the affected communities to feel supported. And third, that the Board of Commissioners applauds at the time recent state legislation requiring a system of tracking incidents of hate and bias. So I just want to offer that. In my conversations with Latifa Amato, our equity manager, one of the things we don't have is, I think what Commissioner Buck is raising here, we don't really have a process a defined process that makes it really clear about when we're going to make statements or engage in certain ways. We do have agreements we have what's called an Equity and Community Consortium, which is basically the university, LCC, the school districts, the Eugene, Springfield, Lane County, LTD, all the public agencies that have come together and signed on to this agreement, particularly related to equity work and responses to incidents of hate and bias. But really what you end up seeing are sort of groups like Team Springfield, that is a long established group of public agencies that will come together. I think it's 4 public agencies in Springfield that then make statements. So that's all to say we do have a gap here that exists, and that is that we don't have a defined kind of protocol and process for how we rapidly respond to incidences like this. So that we know that needs to be developed. You have this board order that says this is what we stand for and what we stand against, but we need to sort of take that a step further to say, when these incidents happen in Lane County, here's how we're going to go about responding. So I just wanted to offer that as some context.
That's a great lead up to my second request, which is to have a work session specifically about what that process is, when we do and when we don't, and with whom, which agencies at the time. Do we want to do it collectively? Do we want to do it individually? So that I would like to have head nods on as well.
So let's try and do both head nods at the same time, and let me repeat what it is, if I may. You're asking for a statement on the current existent issues that are surrounding anti-Semitism that have hate bias, thank you, to be written by the board, and then authorizing the chair to sign and or deliver the statement if it's in between board meetings.
That in, just publicize it through our PIO.
Perfect. And then the second part of that is that we have a work session on our journal policy and procedure surrounding both ongoing and emergent. Very good. We have head nods. It looks like you have all 5 concurrent head nods on that, Ms. Mulcahy.
Thank you.
Any further future board assignment requests? Vice Chair Trieger.
Thank you, Chair. Before I launch into my item, I just want to appreciate Commissioner Buck for bringing this forward, appreciate her for her statement earlier, and just clarify too, as the administrator said, we essentially have the enabling legislation to issue statements without waiting for, but having an actual process that we all agree to is important. But for me, another reason it is important is not just for the board to make a statement as elected officials, but for the organization, for it to be clear that this is a stance of an organization. Board members come and go. The organization is the more constant. The organization is also actually operationalizing the policies through programs, so more directly connected to community and the broadest number of people who are impacted by these events. So I really appreciate you bringing forward a way for us to make clear as an organization, not just as whoever happens to be in board positions at a given time, how we respond.
Thank you, Vice Chair.
My item is, it was brought to our attention, the chair and I, by our board supervisor. There is a court security committee, and this is a statutory committee for presiding judges, and the current presiding judge, Judge McAlpin, makes an appointment to this committee, and he's looking for a recommendation for a volunteer commissioner to serve on that committee. It wasn't on Diana Jones's radar or ours because it's just one of those weird hybrid things where a commissioner is appointed to sit on it, but it's a committee of the courts. This is a committee that meets quarterly. Typically, it's a Monday at noon meeting. They're online right now. And the purpose of this committee is for, reading here, the court and community leadership to have ongoing coordination meetings regarding courthouse security and emergency preparedness. So it's very site-specific. The committee has ongoing discussions about the status of the court facilities security account budget, responsible for ensuring there are plans for security and business continuity responses for each court facility, and making recommendations for, among other things, some examples, transport of inmates, handling hazardous materials, responding to emergency alarms, and making sure those systems and processes are in order, and so on. And I have the ORS that establishes this committee, but we have a vacancy there because the commissioner who has historically been serving apparently on that committee is no longer in office. So we need to forward a recommendation to Judge McAlpin for his consideration. I am happy to serve on that. It's not a huge time commitment in the courthouse since it's very site specifics in my district. So if there are head nods for advancing my name for consideration, I would welcome them. But if there's conversation or other commissioners who want more information or might want to be considered for appointment instead, that's on the table as well.
Excellent, Commissioner. And I'll point out that we do conduct court in 2 other locations, both of which are in your district also, which is at the jail facility and also at the juvenile facility. That the Serbian courtrooms in both, all in your district. So any objections to that request by Vice Chair Trieger? And it would there be an accompanying order for that, I would guess, or an accompanying enabling legislation, is how we call it.
I'm not sure. Diana, are you on the line? Does that need a board order since it's actually the judge's appointment? What's the procedure on that?
I am on the line, and all we need is head nods, and I will pass that head nod recommendation on to Liz Rambo in the courts, and the judge will put an order together at their end.
With no opposition, we have 5 head nods, Ms. Jones. Thank you, Vice Chair Trieger. Any further future board assignment requests? It's nice when we can get a future board assignment out of the way when the request is being made. It's a good job. Bravo. Then, Mr. Mokrais, can you review assignments, please?
So did I hear that last one is not an assignment? We just got taken care of. Okay. So then the assignment is Commissioner Buck's request to, 1, have a statement provided by the Board of Commissioners regarding recent incidents of hate and bias, and then 2, to schedule a work session on the policy and procedures for response to incidents of hate and bias in the community.
Any questions on that? Okay, well done, Ms. Mokrais. That wasn't a particularly simple one to hear and record, so well done. Then with that, we'll move down our agenda. The next item on the agenda is executive session. I'm going to go through very quickly go through today's and tomorrow's schedule of events. We're going to move into executive session. I'll also read us in for an afternoon executive session, which will begin at 1:30. Both of those executive sessions will be remote, so you can conduct them in your office or from your home office, whichever is the more convenient for you. Then this evening, we meet in a joint session with the Eugene City Council. Once again, that is a remote meeting, which can conduct in your office. You'll be very lonely, I think, if you do, or in your home office, which might be lonely there too, I don't know. And then tomorrow we have a regular meeting at 1:30 in the afternoon. We have a small agenda of regular business tomorrow before we move into what is a work session, a strategic plan review and discussion. And there's one thing that Ms. Westland said, is that they're working on the strategic plan, which she said aligns with yours, meaning Lane County strategic plan. And that's something that we'll talk about, I'm sure, tomorrow, is how do strategic plans align. So with that, any questions on the order of the agenda for today and tomorrow? And at the sound of my gavel, we will retire into executive session remote. And at the gavel, let's reconvene let's give us a few minutes to get ready, and we'll reconvene at 10 till 11 remote. I'm going to now read us into executive.
Chair Farr,
Yes.
if I can just interrupt for 1 second and add an addition, tomorrow's meeting at 1:30 will be in the BCC conference room, not in Harris Hall.
Thank you for that. Thank you. And it's clearly stated on the agenda, but I did not repeat it out loud, so that will be in the BCC conference room, public meeting in the BCC conference room at 1:30 tomorrow, with a small amount of regular business and then the discussion regarding strategic planning. So at the sound of my gavel, we'll adjourn, we'll recess the Board of County Commissioners and reconvene as in executive session as the Board of Commissioners. The Board of County Commissioners will meet in executive session to conduct deliberations with persons designated by the governing body to carry on labor negotiations and to consider informational records that are exempt by law from public inspection. This executive session is held pursuant to ORS 192.6602 D and F, which allows the Board of Commissioners to meet in executive session for the purposes listed. Representatives of the news media and designated staff shall be allowed to attend the executive session. All other members of the audience are asked to leave the room. Representatives of the news media are specifically directed not to report on any of the deliberations during the executive session, except to state the general subject of the session as previously announced. No decision may be made in executive session. We reserve the right to come back out into public session should the need arise.